I'm just looking at this composition down this alleyway of trees. Really nice sort of framing. I'm going to use the 24mm lens. It's quite a wide angle shot and I want that sense of depth, foreground all the way through to background.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of my video series on composition. In part 1 I gave you some of my thoughts about composition, the rules involved and some ways to think about it, some methods and techniques. In part 2 I want to go into the field and give you some practical examples, and I'm going to go to Hagley Park for that. I'll make a few trips on my bike. It's only 10 or 15 minutes from home and there's lots of different shooting scenarios there. So let's head into Hagley Park for the first shot. So this is the first image I'd like to discuss, taken just a few days ago in Hagley Park early one morning. The first thing is aspect ratio. I've chosen almost a square format because I thought that suited the composition or the framing of the image. Secondly, a point of interest. I've waited until someone walked into the scene to provide a point of interest. This also provides a sense of narrative in that she's walking from left to right through the scene, so a bit of a story there. There's a secondary point of interest, which is this band rotunda in the background. And if you take the band rotunda, the main point of interest, the person, and the brightest spot in the image, the sun, together they form a diagonal line which runs through the image from top right to bottom left. So diagonal lines are always quite interesting in a composition. They can be seen as a bit of a leading line that leads you through the image. And the last thing I'd like to discuss, which was quite purposeful about this image, was the lighting. That lovely soft backlighting through mist provides a real sense of depth to the image. We've got a bit of aerial perspective happening as the background trees fade off into the distance. It gives this image a real sense of depth. So how could I improve this image? I did wonder about if I'd caught the person a little bit earlier. I think the lineup would have been a little bit better, just a microsecond earlier, so she's not overlapping the band rotunda in the background. And the other thing is, I wondered whether it would have helped with a little bit of more cropping from the right hand side, just to make it a bit tighter, and it almost lines up on thirds then with the vertical elements. So possibly a crop would help this image as well. So this image is also taken in the early morning, and the first aspect of composition, which is quite strong in this image, is leading lines. So we've got these quite strong leading lines that lead you through the image, adding a sense of depth. The second aspect of the composition is it's got some pretty good points of interest. So that main one there of the man walking the dog into the scene, and the secondary one of the two cyclists going through the scene on the left hand side, just add a sense of narrative, a story to the image. And the last aspect is the lighting. So I've got quite strong side lighting coming from the side there, highlighting the subjects and providing a sense of drama to the image, and just making it pleasing to look at.
It's quite a wide angle shot and I want that sense of depth, foreground all the way through to background. Well, let's see what I got.
here's another early morning image where I've put myself in the scene to add a point of interest. And once again we have those strong leading lines. We've got the pathway, we've got 2 rows of trees coming down either side. We've also got this tree trunk out of focus on the right, and that's quite a classic compositional technique where you place a foreground object out of focus to the side of the scene, and it helps lead the eye through the scene and it gives it a sense of depth. We've also got the point of interest, as I pointed out before, and the strong directional side light coming from the left there.
Pretty nice through here, high contrast sun, shadows, very low warm light. Should be able to make something of this. Very beautiful. Yeah, very nice.
Here's another image shot in the early morning, and I was drawn to the lighting. It was quite unusual in that the sun was bouncing off the lake water and causing lovely lighting on the trunks of the trees, so that's what attracted me to the area. And then as a point of interest I decided to put myself in the scene, and that also creates a little bit of narrative. But once again in this image we have leading lines coming in via that pathway on the left. Also the shadows create nice leading lines coming into the image. As well as that, we've got that strong directional side light coming from the left, adding a bit of drama to the scene. And of course we have the point of interest, which is me there, which also adds a little bit of narrative or sense of story to the image.
I have photographed these pine trees quite a few times. They're always different. The best conditions are mist because it separates the background, but these overcast conditions with a bit of side lighting and the hills in the background today are pretty good. So what I like to do generally is just walk around, let the trees rearrange until I find where things line up and looks appealing. So I'm just mucking around here a little bit, hoping that the light will improve. It's not bad at the moment. It's a really lovely sky. I've got a polarizer on the camera which makes the sky a little bit more dramatic, deepens the blues and separates the clouds. I've got a 50mm lens on, and I'm going to take a bit of a panorama, slightly looking up into the pines to give me a bit of room to correct the perspective later in Lightroom. I think that'll work pretty well, and I'll probably go and put myself over in the scene by standing over or using the gym over there. I think I'll take a shot now and then wait for a bit, and hopefully the sun will come out.
For this image I've chosen to do a stitched panorama because I wanted to contrast the point of interest, which is the figure on the jungle gym, which happens to be me again, with the really tall big collection of Pacific pines, and a panorama really suited that sort of format. So the compositional elements in this scene are of course the point of interest. There's a good sense of depth in the image because we have these vertical trees mainly in the foreground. In the middle ground we have the figure or the point of interest, and way off in the distance with a good amount of atmospheric perspective we have the hills and the distant trees. So I think this image works in that respect. With regards to improvements, I did wonder whether I should actually retouch out the crane in the background, which is a little bit distracting, doesn't really add to the scene. And I also wondered whether a little bit of cropping might help. So if I remove this on the left hand side, which is quite mucky and distracting, and a bit off the top, kind of bring the point of interest almost into the area of thirds. It'll kind of simplify the image, and it has quite a nice balance in this respect, in that there are fewer trees on the left hand side and quite a dense number of trees on the right hand side, and this composition also makes quite an interesting image, so haven't decided between the two yet. Another aspect that would have really improved the image is going through on the right hand side, and it was approaching sunset, and there was a chance that the sun would poke through and highlight some of the trees, and that would have really made a much more spectacular image, but it just didn't happen, and that's often the way with landscape photography, but it's worth waiting for those special moments. I want to talk briefly about defaulting to using your feet rather than a zoom lens to make a subject larger or smaller. I think zoom lenses can make us a bit lazy in that we tend to just zoom in on a subject rather than walk closer to it, but by walking to a subject and changing a focal length completely changes the composition. So in this case, I've taken a shot with an 85mm lens and then switched to a 24mm lens and walked much closer to the tree, and you can see that although the tree is the same size in each image, the composition is quite different. The 24mm includes a lot more of the background, and this would be even more pronounced if the sky happened to be cloudy. You'd see a lot more clouds. So next time, even if you've got a zoom lens on, think about where you stand, because that makes all the difference in your composition. So that concludes this series on composition, but I'd like to leave you with a couple of points. First one is only show your best work. So although I showed 5 or 6 images today, I did shoot many more, and some of these were multiple exposures or parts of panoramas, but also a lot of images that were almost there but not quite good enough, and some of them are quite good but not the best of that subject. And it's worth spending some time editing down to the best and just showing your best. The second point is, don't forget you can do a lot of composition adjustments in post-production, such as cropping, lightening or darkening parts of an image, removing distracting elements. All of these things can really change a composition, so don't forget about the post-production part of the process. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.